Hello, I'm Harry Hobson, President and CEO of Plymouth Harbor.
And I'm Karen Novak, the Administrator for Strategic Health here at Plymouth Harbor.
Hi, Karen, and with us today we've got a guest who everybody's familiar with, George McGonigal, and George is our Vice President of Facilities. And a little bit later in this update, we'll talk about a couple major capital projects that we've got going and where we are with those projects. So, but before we do that, Karen, uh, there are several things here today. We'll do what we normally do with our campus update on COVID. I'll talk a little bit about the vaccination clinic activities, and then we'll share some preliminary discussions that we're having regarding our reopening plans on some of the communal spaces and amenities here at Plymouth Harbor. And then George will spend some time on those projects. So, Karen, why don't we go ahead with the campus update?
It's another day that I really like to start our video off by saying, you know what, we have no residents that are positive and no resident is currently showing any kind of signs or symptoms of COVID whatsoever. We do still have one resident in Smith Care. I almost forgot about him. That is an observation. He came back from the hospital and it's our normal observation period. So we're getting him out of isolation or observation tomorrow, as a matter of fact. We
Right.
do have one staff member that actually came back positive, and it's very interesting because she had both vaccines, but she was exposed to COVID before she had gained that 95% immunity. So we have one staff member, team member that is positive currently, as well as 4 team members that were around this person that are now in observation.
Karen, we've heard a lot about that 2 week period following the booster and the science behind that. And as I was following that early this morning regarding our team member, and then to ultimately find out that it really occurred within that 2 week period following the booster. I thought that was
Sure. One of the real great things about infection control and identifying cause is that you have to create a timeline. And with that timeline, events unfold. So we were able to really trace back and see the relationship between that last booster and the immunity period of that 2 week after that last booster. So it came in handy, we'll say, getting that timeline done this morning.
right. Let's transition to some of the vaccine news. Yesterday, we conducted, it was either our fifth or our sixth vaccine clinic, and we actually administered vaccines to over 140 people yesterday. That was our smallest group because primarily it was designed for boosters only. Uh, I also like to report that we've had reasonable success, I think, regarding the number of team members who've now received at least the first vaccine. When we started this, I reported out to you that 42% of our team members had agreed to or had received the vaccine. We went into a campaign over the last several weeks, and I'm really pleased to report that that number is now at least 60%. So that's outstanding. We received some very good questions in our small group sessions, and I know that because of the answers and really quote setting the record straight, it really convinced some folks to move forward with it. And Karen, you did a nice job in responding to those, and I think really putting people's mind at ease. Well done.
There's just so much out there in the social media aspect that just can kind of get scary, and people start to believe all the bad things. But when you truly peel back some of the myths that are out there on social media, the science is the core value of it all. And truly giving that science and that information to our team members, I think really benefited both them and us here at Plymouth Harbor.
Karen, I'm going to ask you a little bit about the news that came out earlier today related to CDC update. But before I do that, there's a question that has been bubbling up around campus, and I'm sure beyond Plymouth Harbor. So let me set the stage for you, okay? And that is that the question is, if I'm in a small group setting and we have all been vaccinated, we've received our booster, we're outside of that 2 week post booster shot, why do we continue to have to wear our masks?
But, COVID is still here and it's going to be here for quite some time. But, Harry, let's just say that you've got COVID and you've had your vaccines and it's been 2 weeks, since you've had that booster. But that COVID, that virus likes to stay right there in your nose and not really go anywhere. So if we're in a conversation, let's say it's George, you and I sitting here talking without our masks. Now, mind you, we're going to be talking and spewing. I don't want to say spores, but we're going to be spewing that virus as you talk. Both George and I can acquire that virus and then take it home with us. Or our residents, you can actually take it and it can harbor inside your nares. And if you visit with somebody, let's say offsite, or family comes to visit and they may not have had that vaccine, you can infect that person. George can infect whoever's at his house. Harry, you too can infect people. So know that you may not have that infection, but you have the ability to transmit that virus to somebody else. So right now, the CDC is saying keep that mask on at least until we get that herd immunity, which is about 85% of the people in the United States that get vaccinated.
You provided us with that response late yesterday, and now it makes so much more sense because at first glance, but we've all been vaccinated. We're not going to acquire it. But then when you said once we break this circle of conversation, then if I had it, I very easily could have passed it off to both of you or one of you. And then when you leave and go home, you just carried it with you, and there's the transmission. So
Absolutely. That's the chain of infection that we always say. We got to break that chain so we stop that virus.
right. Well, thank you for that, and I hope that answers the question that's been, as I say, kind of bubbling up a bit. I also made a reference to the CDC update that came out today. Could you touch on that, please?
Sure. The CDC is starting to catch up with the real world in vaccines. It came out with some new criteria or new guidelines for those that have been vaccinated and then in turn being exposed to the virus itself. They've given us three criteria to really go by. If a person who has been vaccinated and has 2 weeks, after that booster, so they're at full immunity, if they become exposed to somebody who has COVID, they really don't need to be isolated. The criteria, though, for this is you have to have both vaccines and wait that 2 week period. You have to remain asymptomatic, meaning no symptoms at all are you going to exhibit. And interestingly, it'll be 3 months to the day, within a 3 month period to the day you get that last booster, you're considered safe right now. You can still not have to be in observation during that period, that 14-day period. That being said, let me repeat that for the criteria about being exposed to somebody who has COVID and you have your vaccines, the CDC states you don't need to be in observation if you've had both vaccines in a 2 week period for that immunity to be built up. You are asymptomatic, meaning you have no symptoms whatsoever, and it is within a 3 month period after you have had that second dose. So right now they're erring on the side of caution with that three month period. So stay tuned. I think as we learn more about the vaccines and the relationship with the virus, they may extend that 3 month period out. But interestingly enough, if our residents in the Smith Care Center or in the ALF memory care, if they are exposed to someone who has COVID, they have to remain in transmission based precautions for a 14-day period. So nothing has really changed in our regulated areas. So we're going to stay tuned to the CDC and see what comes out next.
Okay, thank you for that. Karen, you've seen me look a couple times to my left while you were talking. Let me explain that. First of all, and I hear this in the community, in the greater community as well, that during these updates, people listen in to your educational tips. You have a vast amount of knowledge in infection control. And when I was looking over here, I'm reminded that in about 2 weeks and 1 day, that's how long it's been when I announced that you were going to be moving from being the director of nurses in our Smith Care Center into a newly created position, which essentially was the infection control preventionist. Okay. And while it was the administrator of strategic healthcare initiatives, if you remember, I said to you and others, we've got the right person right here on our campus. We're going to move her into this position and we'll figure it out. And that was almost a year ago.
It's hard to
So
believe.
and you brought so much to all of us, and we look forward to you continuing to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. I work with a really good team, though.
Yeah. Well, let me talk a little bit about preliminary reopening plans. And now I think more people are also sitting up in their chairs right now, I'm sure, wondering what we're going to say on this. But let me start by saying how pleased we are to see the positivity rate, particularly in Sarasota County. It's been trending down.
Mhm.
Okay. And I think the most recent, just a 1 week period, is now below 5%. In fact, I believe I read something like 3.8%.
Correct.
So it's trending in the right direction. It's very important that that continue and that 5%. And Karen will probably mention that a little bit later, why that's an important bar. Okay. So 5%. So having said that, we have, for the last week or so, been in uh, our conversations regarding reopening some of Plymouth Harbor. So I'm going to read a little bit from the splash, which you may already have by the time you see this video today. If not, it is now available. So what I'm saying here is effective March 8th, 2021. Okay, so effective March 8th, small group gatherings. So the small group gatherings are still not to exceed 10 attendees, socially distanced and wearing masks. Beyond the colony rooms that many of you already have booked, we're going to encourage you to use the cafe, the bistro, the flower restaurant. But also, in doing that, please contact dining services to reserve that time. We're going to continue at the small group gatherings at 10. It's another question that's come up. Okay, now what are we basing that 10 on? And I know you want to respond to that. We have discussed it.
Sure, the Department of Health, that is their recommendations or their standards that they have for the state of Florida for small group gatherings, not to exceed 10. And that's again to help prevent that spread of COVID.
Right, right. So we're gonna continue to hear for that a bit longer. Okay. Now let me move into visitation. So independent living residents visitors. We will reopen visitations for our independent residents for visitors who have been vaccinated. That's very important. So visitors from the outside coming into Plymouth Harbor will have had to been vaccinated. Our screeners will be asking for proof of vaccination and a photo ID. That's very legitimate. Uh, Independent living visitations will be restricted to residence apartments only. We've not yet decided when we'll open up visitation to our communal spaces. So I want to say that again because that's a little bit of a departure from what we were thinking several months ago, where we said we're going to do it at designated areas. What we're saying is you're vaccinated, visitors will be screened, and then it's always nice to meet them in the lobby, of course, but the visitation would occur in your apartment.
Mhm.
Let me talk about the Wellness Center. The Wellness Center will reopen to all vaccinated team members. And I know people are very pleased with that as well. So all vaccinated team members, and when I say vaccinated team members, they've received their booster plus 2 weeks and a day, all right? And reservations will be required. Summer wanted me to be sure and emphasize that. So that's all for March 8th. As we move toward the 1st of April, and George, I know this is in your area as well. We've talked about transportation. We receive a lot of questions about that. So what you're going to read today is under transportation, limited auto transportation will be brought back online for non-medical appointments and downtown destinations. Bus transportation is going to be limited to 6 residents on those buses. And that's also going to be brought back online for Publix and some downtown venues. We'll be providing more information on all of this, of course, in March. And then also the days of the week and hours, along with instructions of how to make reservations, will be announced in March. So transportation, we're looking at bringing some of that back online by April 1. We're going to have auto transportation to designated areas, and we're going to reintroduce our bus for Publix runs as well. We've been asked about valet services, and rightfully so, George. I thought your response was very good on that. I'm certainly all in on it, and that is, let's see how our transportation going first, okay? Because so much of this is dependent on how we staff it and throughout the day or weekends. So we are going to come back and look at the valet services, but we won't have anything to report back to you until May, and that would become effective the 1st of June. So that's coming. And then some additional dates that we want to announce. Dining services. Curtis Cornell, our director of dining services, most of you have met Curtis, and his team are working on plans to reopen the Mayflower Restaurant and Cafe, as well as offering some small catering events. I believe you'll also see some movement in that area before April 1. So stay tuned, because we believe, and Curtis believes, that before April 1, we will be reopening those areas, okay? And as it looks right now, yes, we will maintain something to the degree of 50% capacity. But the fact is, we're opening it back up. He's also preparing a business plan that will address some of the possibilities for reopening of the Sunset Bistro at a later date. I'm excited about that, George. I know you've worked with him on that business plan as well, and Curtis and his team are taking a fresh look at that. So that's good news. Now, as we go through this, I was creating this document, working with Karen. She always says to me, and I'm going to read it because it's in boldface on this document, it's important to remember that strict mask wearing and social distancing is an important part of managing this pandemic. As long as we can continue to stay at or below 5% positivity rates, we can get closer to normal, and we can keep these venues open longer and maybe permanently. Again, observing social distancing guidelines will be the key to our success. So they're still very much a priority. I think most of the sources, we deal, as we've said before, with evidence-based sources. We're going to be wearing those masks through the rest of 2021. I'm certain of that.
And I want to really stress the idea of wearing your mask. Even if you're in the elevator and you're just going down 1 or 2 floors, remember to put your mask on. It takes all of us together to really keep that COVID virus out of Plymouth Harbor.
I know we had a situation this week, and it's unfortunate, and we want to minimize any conflict at all. Okay, but we had someone in the tower elevator did not have the mask on, and somebody else jumped on the elevator and asked the person to put the mask on, and the response was, "I'm only going a couple of floors." Well, a couple of floors is all it takes. So
Mhm.
please wear your mask. So,
Thank you.
uh, George, if I could refer to you now, and we could talk a little bit about the elevators and windows. Um, uh, wow, I mean that's how I start this because I've just been so impressed in what I've seen regarding both of those projects. So just start, if you would, a bit with what we mean by the elevator projects, and then going to the window projects, what those are, and maybe and then an update.
Okay. Well, actually, both of our contractors have been working very well in the field. We've had issues, delays in product and that type of thing, but overall, the projects have both gone very smoothly. The elevator project, we actually yesterday got our state approval on elevator two. They're currently working on some controls issues because, of course, we have three elevators that have to communicate with each other. Um, so we're going to be operating elevator two internally through probably middle of next week. And then once all those buttons are done, we will turn that operation over to the residents probably Thursday of next week. And then very shortly after that, probably a week from Monday, we will take elevator one out of service and they'll begin on that. And the game plan is to have all three elevators up and running by the end of April.
That is great. I know everybody's looking forward to that, and
And Harry, we have had some feedback from residents that they find it difficult to read the stainless steel numbers in the cab. So we have effected a change. They're going to change out all of those numbers so that those will be white numbers, similar to what we have now. Makes it a little easier for our visually impaired residents to see those numbers.
I really appreciate that feedback that they gave you, and then you and I communicated about that. And there's no question that really needed to be done. So I'm pleased that we're able to do it. So
So then moving on to the window project, again, that one is moving very smoothly. The contractor, I don't think we could ask for better responsiveness from them, especially dealing with some of the product issues that we've had, delays from the manufacturer, and they continue to adjust and work around that. Where we are today is we're currently installing the windows in Smith Care. And the game plan is we will have that completed by the end of March. So come the end of March, North Garden will be fully protected, just like East Garden and West Garden and the Energy Center are now. So the next step, of course, is the tower. And our game plan there is mid-March, we will start setting up for installation. And what that's going to entail is we're going to have to build some fairly substantial scaffolding both in the front of the building and at the rear of the building, exiting out to the pool to provide protection from all that overhead work that's going to go on. And there will be a little bit of inconvenience in terms of accessing the building relative to that. But of course, it's just absolutely crucial given the nature of the work that's happening above people. So that'll start about mid-March, and then we'll start installing windows at the end of March, beginning of April. Dinah is already communicating with residents on the upper floors relative to what to expect, and she'll continue to do that down the building so that people have plenty of advance warning. The game plan right now is we hope to have the entire campus protected by the end of October.
great. George, I've said this to you before. It's been a real joy, actually, to watch how much Lisa has grown throughout this project. I think we're all impressed with that.
Well, and I've gotten a lot of that same feedback from residents. Both Lisa and Dinah have really made this project possible. There's no way I could do that management and handle the residents and meet their needs. And the feedback we've gotten from residents, the end product is just spectacular. They're
Really is.
pleased with the quality of the work and the final product. So
You know, I know I speak on behalf of not only George, but Karen as well, and so many of us, that how much we appreciate the support and just the cooperation we receive from the residents and resident families on everything from the window elevator projects through this whole COVID past year. So again, I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody. So,
I agree.
well, Karen, I think we are coming to the conclusion of this video, unless you've got something else to add.
Nope, not at this time. We want to remind everybody to keep that social distance, that 6-foot perimeter around you at all times. Remember to wash your hands quite frequently and use those antibacterial wipes to hit those high contact areas. But most importantly, when we can do something to save everybody here at Plymouth Harbor, save a life, remember to don your mask anytime that you leave your apartment, whether it's just to go out for a few minutes or if it's going to be out for the whole day. Remember to grab your mask and put it on. Thank you.
Excellent. Hey, George, thank you for joining us today. A very, very good update. And we'll receive more of those too as time goes on. So, well, without further ado, it's now time for us to don our masks.